All righty, bow hunters, welcome back to another episode. I'm excited. I'm sitting here online with Brian Johnson from the Anatomy Hunter. Welcome, Brian. It's been really cool to actually watch your. I only found your stuff probably at the start of this year, and I really admire, especially the what would you call them? Your like what you've got there behind the deer, essentially the anatomy that you've built out with a taxidermy, but it's like a model essentially where you've got access where
Model.
you can point different arrows through and show what the angles and the shot process is going to be, where the angles are going to be based on if you're shooting. I think most of what you focus on is really whitetail and bear, I believe. That's like your world a lot more. Is that correct?
So far, that and yeah, because that's the animals that I hunt, and then I have access to them because everything that I'm doing, I have to be able to prove it 100%. So if I
Mm.
don't have the carcass of the animal, and bears and deer are my main thing right now. But obviously, I want to spread out to a lot of things, which has brought my interest up to with Australia because I've got my ears wide open. What could be done over there in Australia? Because I've got a fetish for wanting to hunt pigs.
Yeah, they're great.
I hear that you've got a river that floods, and then when it goes down, you've got all these free range pigs running all over the place there.
Yep.
And I saw a guy there hunting them with a bunch of arrows and stuff and going through that. And I thought a spot and stalk, man, that had me fired up.
So we've got literally you can hunt them in most of the country because they're so rampant, right? But you can also hunt every single day. So there's no times when you cannot hunt pigs. But there's that land which is up in the northern territory essentially where you've got the riverbeds that will rise in the wet season and come back down in the not wet season essentially. But then there's things like mountain boars which are a very different breed of pig essentially. There are actually I think about six different species of pigs that are all intertwined and hybrid throughout Australia. So what you'll find is different styles like a longer leg pig, a longer snout pig, a more like brute type, what would be the right word? I guess like short and stocky type pig. Like it is very interesting, but I've actually got some. Here's the latest pig that I shot from his tusk. I haven't got his head up here yet, but he went 30 inches on one side, which is like the elusive number that everyone is aiming for. Is that and when you score it, essentially like the 30 inch, and then the other side where it was snapped off, it didn't quite do as well, which brought his score down in general. But yeah, and to be honest, pigs are very cool as a creature. I think a lot of people say they're very easy until you actually get to the old ones, and the wiser they get, the harder they get to hunt.
So how do you hunt them?
Spot and stalk. I would say majority of the hunting here in Australia is spot and stalk, which is very obviously different. Not many people would set up a tree stand. It's not to say that people don't do it, and I think it depends on what species you're hunting, but pigs in particular, they are an animal that really like to feed and forage. They will hang out in an area for a while. They'll be somewhat patternable because they'll always be going to food and water and then back to bedding and hanging out in that little zone. Once they've raped and privileged that area, pilgrimed it, and gone for what they need for the food and whatever, they will move on and they'll continue just doing that. And they might follow a creek source, they might follow water, they might jump from farm to farm where it's got different crops. So they're very interesting in that source. And sometimes when you've got good cropping land and good farming land where there's hills and water and everything they need, they will just breed and breed in that area and just keep populating. So you can literally you see them on the hillside, you get your wind right. You can walk right up to them because their eyesight is not great. Obviously, you need to be cautious when you're walking into them. They are aware. They will look. They will pretend to eat, even though they know you're there, just to try catch you out again. But you can really get really quite close to pigs without.
How close?
Oh, like I've had pigs at 2 meters from me.
Okay. So
Yeah.
20 yards is not unheard of.
No, like honestly, we aim to get under 20 yards for our shooting. So most bow hunters in Australia would aim to get 20 meters or less. So I don't know what 20 meters, I think it's roughly 22 yards. So 22 yards or less, we would be aiming for when shooting pigs because the closer you get, the less likely you are to have a missed shot, I guess is the best way to say it. And pigs will actually, I've seen pigs react the exact same way that a whitetail deer would react to a shot, where they drop, they turn, they rotate when they're trying to push off and take off. Like I've seen pigs literally turn on the spot when you take the shot. If they're aware of you and they're alert that there's something happening, they can be just as flighty as something like a whitetail.
And they're that fast.
They're probably not as fast as a whitetail because I've never seen a whitetail jump like that. But yeah, they're fast. They definitely
Get over
react.
to 20 yards by the time your bow goes off, they will actually move and you'll hit them in a different spot than when
Yes,
you're aiming. They are that
correct.
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
If they're alert
Oh,
enough, a lot of the time they're probably a bit more relaxed. If you catch them and they're feeding, one thing you can always do is look at their tail. And if their tail is swinging and swaying, they're very happy. And they're just, as they say, happy as pig in mud, eating their food and they're happy to
they're
go. Yeah.
So which type of pigs would you go hunting if you wanted to get them? Where's the most pigs?
I think really it's most of Australia you could go to and you would find pigs. So Northern Territory, what they do is it's a different style of hunting because it's so hot. And I think I've been told it once before, and I don't know what the actual degree is, but there's a heat degree or degree Celsius is what we talk in, degrees Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit is essentially what you guys talk in. So 25 degrees Celsius, which I don't necessarily know what that is in Fahrenheit, but that's roughly what a pig's body wants to stay at. If they go too high above that, they start to suffer. But up in the Northern Territory, it's 40-degree heat. So they always have to be in either shade or in the water. So what you do, and during the dry seasons, essentially, people will find the water sources and they know that they can walk those areas and there will always be pigs around because they're going to stay very close to water source, very close to a shaded area that they can be in and rest in. When you start to venture down south from the north of Australia in general, I think pretty much the same thing applies. They're always going to be chasing food and water, but what you'll probably find is maybe where they bed down and things might change a little bit different. It's a lot more flat country up there versus as you come down further, it's probably a lot more hilly and a lot more bushland and stuff like that. You can really hunt pigs anywhere. I think if you want to find some of the biggest pigs, you'd probably go to Northern Territory.
But do you generally always see pigs and have action?
Yeah, like I would, it does depend on where you go. Like I've got a block that's got red deer on it, and I would say one in every 5 times there'll be pigs there. But I would say two out of every one of those 1 in 5s, if that makes sense, there would be a lot more pigs, like because they ebb and flow through the area. So I feel like it does depend on where you are versus other blocks that I've gone to. There's 100% always pigs there. You've always see them there. You'll always hunt them there.
I see.
Yeah.
What other animals can you hunt over there that's free range that you don't have to pay an outfitter for and a bunch of money? What can you tell me about that?
So it really depends on which part of the country you're going into. A lot of the issue with bow hunting in Australia is access. We've got 2 states where you can't actually bow hunt, so Tasmania and South Australia. But if you're in if you're in Victoria or New South Wales, there is, which is on the east coast, there is private land access that you can go for. And in that case, you might have access to pigs, deer, goats, and it's going to depend on which part of the country that you're hunting as to what sort of deer you'll get access to. So in New South Wales, you get access to fallow deer and probably some red deer, depending on where you're hunting. And then there'll always probably be pigs and goats on those parts. In Victoria, you'd probably get access to pigs, sambar deer, which is our biggest deer species, and some places would have goats. A lot of the places would also have foxes across those areas that I'm talking about as well. Western Australia, Queensland, Northern Territory, you are going to probably have to get some form of private access or pay an outfitter. We have access where you can go and hunt on a block that you don't have to pay an outfitter. So you don't have to have a guide with you. You just pay to be on the block. So for instance, it might be 100 Australian dollars that you pay each day, and you pay that no matter what you kill, what you take when you're on that weekend. Sometimes they might have a trophy fee, so they'll let you hunt anything on the block. But if you shoot an antler with a deer with antlers, then they'll charge you more for that. And it's really location and property dependent, will change and vary based on that. So yeah, there's a lot of access and a lot of availabilities. It's just making sure that you've got I guess the logistics of it all planned out. But there's a lot that you can do over here in Australia. The fact you can hunt every day just makes it very appealing, right?
For all species, you can hunt it every day.
Yeah, as long as it's an invasive species. So obviously, or not obviously, but the native species we cannot hunt with the bow or rifle. Kangaroos, every once in a while, you can get tags and there's a whole system for that, but not for bows or for rifle. But when it comes to bow hunting, we're allowed to hunt the invasive species, which pretty much covers your 6 species of deer. We've got 3 bovine species, goats and pigs, and then wild foxes and wild cats and wild dogs. So that's pretty much the species that we have here that you can hunt in Australia. Oh, actually, camels, donkeys, and a few other things as well. So a pretty wild country that we've got here. Depends on where you are in the country as well.
So what's the premier animal to hunt? If you wanted to go hunting yourself, what would be the one animal that you'd really want to get? Because I take it pigs don't mean much to you. They're all over the place, no big deal.
Correct. There's a very interesting, and it's something that we always talk about on the podcast, is like the hierarchy of animals in the sense of how you make a hierarchy. For me, I'm still very obsessed with red deer because I've shot plenty of them, but I haven't shot a big stag yet. That's one thing. But at the same time, I just love them as a creature. I think they're very fascinating. But within saying that, like all of the deer species, I'm very interested in shooting all the deer species. I've only shot two here in Australia, which is the fallow deer and the red deer.
And how big are your red deer there, body wise? Are they the size of an elk?
I think they're maybe
About right?
a little bit smaller than an elk, I would say. What would an elk weigh? Let's say
200 pounds,
300,
800.
800. Yeah, I was thinking that's a small elk. I think probably a big stag, like some of the biggest that we have, maybe 200 to 220 kilos. So I'd say like maybe, what's that, like 440 to 500 pounds, maybe?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you go out hunting these animals, do you generally see a lot of animals to
What?
hunt?
Yeah, once again, it's location dependent. So I feel like the different animals will herd and be different. Kind of if you see an elk versus what whitetail do, right? Like sometimes elk will herd up versus sometimes they will be lone soldiers. And then the whitetail seem to be a little bit more, and I'm not sure of this, but do they hang out in their own smaller groups rather than in big groups? I'm not sure if that's a fair assessment, but I feel like very different depending on the animal species. Let's go back to pigs. They will often be in mobs. When a sow is in heat, the boys will show up a lot more, like what a rutting deer would do. And when it comes to the deer species, like red deer, what I've found is that the majority of the year they will stay in smaller packs in the herds that I've seen. I would say 20 is probably the max I've ever seen within one herd. But usually they are hanging in packs of three and four and five, and they're just around the place. Versus a fallow deer, I've seen probably 60 fallow deer in one herd before. So you do see a lot of animals, and I think it depends on what you've got access to on your block. It seems like right now, a lot of the species have really blown up, meaning that there's a lot of numbers here in Australia at the moment because of whatever management systems we've put in place and bits and pieces. I guess they're just adapting and growing. But I would say that the management systems that we have here in Australia probably aren't, I don't know, sufficient. We don't have management. That's the problem. So every once in a while, the government says, okay, they're probably getting out of hand. We need to now send a chopper in there and we'll just shoot everything. And it just gets shot and left. But when you look at actual like conservation and what you guys do and what you guys do a great job of, we have no real acts or ways of protecting animals here like you guys do there.
How big is bow hunting over there? Are there a lot of bow hunters or not?
It's a hard thing to gauge. We don't have an overarching body that kind of follows and says, this is how many bow hunters we have. In America, you guys have to register to hunt, right? We don't have to do that. So in parts of Australia, Queensland, Northern Territory, I'm not sure about Victoria, but definitely Western Australia, you don't have to actually register to say, I've got a bow, I'm shooting, I'm hunting, anything like that. So it makes it really hard to gauge, okay, we've got this many. I would say 30,000 is probably, I guess roughly it'd be 30,000 people, which is wild when you think about how big your population is and how small that is in comparison. It could be bigger, it could be more, it could be less, but I would say as a rough estimate, I would think maybe 30,000 bow hunters.
So what about an archery shop? Let's say you have to have get your bow tuned. You need to buy broadheads. You broke a string. Where do you go? Are there many archery shops in Australia?
They are spread out around the country. There's three different shops here in Brisbane at the moment that you can go and get your bow tuned at or shot at. We've also got independent people that you can send your bow to for tuning. I think a lot of the problem from what I've seen across Australia and when I very first got into bow hunting and why I started the podcast was because I went to an archery shop and I got a bow from them and there was no help whatsoever. There was no like, okay, we're going to tune your bow and this is how you shoot it and this is how you should go on from here on out. Essentially, it was like, here's your bow, walk out, go and figure it out for yourself. So I didn't have a nocking space. I didn't set up my bow correctly. And I went with a recurve firstly, and then I moved into a compound bow. But one of the things I wanted to start the podcast for was A, to find out information for myself, but B, to try and help educate other people around Australia and around the world with, hey, this is actually how you can take it from from go or point A to point Z, from buying a bow, setting it all up, going out and hunting, learning how to stalking efficiently, learning species in particular, and doing deep dives into that. And that's what I've really tried to focus on with the podcast. Yeah.
What about bow companies? Is there a specific company that's big over there?
No, I think really if you look at your big three, they probably sell it everywhere. So your Matthews, Hoyt, and Bowtech, they probably sell in most of the shops. But then
Okay.
you can still get elite prime Yeah, bear, archery, like all your bows you can get access to here.
And then I take it the big broadhead is that Kayuga because that's made in Australia. Is that right?
Correct. I would say they're probably the dominant one within Australia. They've probably put the most research into their product and put out probably the most top of the line product they can. They've really done a lot of behind the scenes work to make sure that it's a product that they're very proud of, and they wouldn't put anything out that was not that way inclined. And what I've seen from them is anytime that they do have a mistake, they're very quick to fix it. They're very quick to own their mistakes and say, look, this is what happened with that batch. This is how we're going to improve it. And then made the jumps from there. So they really put their money where their mouth is, and they've probably grown the most. There's definitely other broadhead companies out here. I would say that they're probably just the most prominent in what they're doing.
And I guess they're up north and they also have a camp where they hunt pigs. Is that
So,
right?
so they've actually got three business owners. One lives in Brisbane. One, Matty, who you're talking about, he's up in northern. Oh, he's up in the Cape where they're doing a lot of hunting. Which he's got Kayuga Adventures, which is a separate brand essentially. And then another one lives down in Sydney. Grant lives down in Sydney, who's a good friend of mine. So, yeah, Ian's in Brisbane. Matty kind of floats between north and south, and then yeah, Ian actually goes up. He's up there right now. Ian is up there guiding hunts for Matty at the moment. So they have Maddie's got Kayuga Adventures, which is the place where they're doing a lot of like bow hunting courses, a lot of education and a lot of guiding. And then they've got Kayuga Broadheads on the side. And the big crossover is obviously they've got the ability to hunt pigs all day, every day up there. And so they're getting a lot of testing and a lot of shots fired with Kayugas up there. And they have people come into camp all the time with other Broadheads, and they're not opposed to that. They're not going to say, oh, you can't use that here or anything like that. What they will do is just say, look, this is the outcome of the Kayuga. This is the outcome of what you've got. And yeah, let the people do the deciding themselves.
So have you shot animals with that broadhead?
Yeah, it's pretty much the major broadhead I've always used. I did use other brands and I always went back to Kayuga. Full disclosure, I actually am sponsored by Kayuga. I am like
Okay.
in the podcast. So maybe you can say I've got a bias, but really what I found, and this is before I was ever sponsored by them, I shot their product, I went away from it and I came back to it because I just found it was better than anything else that I could get my hands on.
Now you have to sharpen them though, right? That's a catch. You can't.
Correct. Depends on which one you're using. So they've got a three blade called the Trizot, and it's got the scalpel. I think that's the best way to say it. A medical grade scalpel. It's got that sort of blade that you can put on the sides, and they are replaceable. So you shoot this broadhead. If it gets too dull, you can replace one of your blades, and you're good to shoot it again. On the broadheads that I shoot mostly is the pilot cuts that they've got. They've also got a bleeder blade in the middle, so it can go from being a two blade to a four blade. And with that four blade, essentially, that's a replaceable sharpening blade as well. Like very, yeah, same sort of grade steel.
Okay. So how, and they're specifically designed for pigs, I take it. That's a big deal.
No, I think what they have done is they've designed broadheads that are relevant for hunting any animal in Australia. But the good thing is that you can set up for a pig and you can use that to shoot a deer. You can use that to shoot a buffalo. You can use it to shoot literally every critter here in Australia. And they've got many different types of broadheads, but what they've done is tested them all on all of the animals that we have here in Australia. And so therefore it's very well tested in what they do. And all fixed blade, no mechanical work, based on the concept that mechanicals can fail. Even with the best of the best, they can fail. And that's the hard part about it versus if you're getting out, maybe you don't have much time to hunt, you get out and you hunt, you want to make sure it's going to do the lethal job that you're chasing. So that is my understanding of what the boys have tried to do there.
And what about the shield on a pig and the different broadheads? Because obviously that's a big deal. If you get a bigger, older boar, they got that big shield.
Yep, big fighting pad. Yeah. Sorry, what the boys do, I've seen it once in camp before, but what they do is they've got a pressure test. Essentially, the short of it is it's a drill that like a wind down drill press, and it measures the pressure, the amount of weight that goes through that has to go through before it would break through the fighting pad and push through the fighting pad. So what they'll do is they've got this
Call the
test.
pad, the pad, Matty, what'd you call it? The fighting pad, the fighting pad.
Fighting pad, yeah, because when the boars, when they get up side by side, they'll smack each other in that part, hence why it gets so thick there. So yeah, we call it the fighting pad, but shield, that works as well. And essentially what they will do is they will cut that whole shield off, that whole fighting pad, the whole front leg. They will put the pressure down on it and it measures the pressure as it goes through. And you'll see the amount that it takes. What we did in camp one day was we got a few different broadheads. We had 5 or 6 different broadhead companies. We got them and we were pushing the end of the arrow to see what we could do. And it hurt a lot on your hand because you were pressing straight down, and sometimes the arrows would bend to even before the broadhead would go through. Now, when you use the Zot, which is their two blade, one of their two blades that they've got, you could literally push it through with your hand pressure like that, which in the sense,
really?
yeah, which in the sense of what they're trying to do on a pig, like it took effort. I'm not saying it was like a non-effort event, but compared to the other broadheads and what we were testing in camp, you were able to do it with the hand on top. You were not able to do that with the other one. So it was like, okay, that's a fair test in itself, just to be able to see like pierceability and what it could actually do in that circumstance. It was very impressive to me. I haven't seen the full test they set up at shops or at the deer expos and stuff they have, but I am going to be at the Wild Deer Expo that's coming up here in October, and the boys will be there. So I'm excited to see their setup when I'm there.
Then you can jump in.
Alrighty, so we just had a little technical difficulty, but we are back in action. So Brian, I feel like I haven't really got to interview you much because we've been chatting all about Australia, which is obviously it's a
I
very
want to do.
yeah, exactly. It's a very exciting place, and it is amazing because we do get to hunt. And I feel like we do have a lot of very experienced hunters in a good way out here, and because of the fact that just the amount of hunting that you're able to do. So it speaks in volumes in that sense. Unfortunately, we've got governments that are an issue as well because they're not great for hunters in particular. They're not in favor of the hunters, and that makes it very hard as well. I would say our government is very PC. We are very down the route of do well, be well at what we say to. Yeah, by what we say is good and right, that's what you have to do is good and right. That's the way that it seems to be going. But with insane, I guess maybe let's not get too political. Let's dive into maybe some of the models that you have behind you. What is your background? What got you into building models? Obviously, well, I've got some talks that I would like to go down in regards to the Reinhardt Avenue as well. But let's talk about your background. What got you into this to start with?
Started out as a taxidermist. That's what I was as a taxidermist for years. I'm 69 years old. I started in 1974.
Mm.
And back then, you could not buy mannequins to speak of. When something gets mounted, the taxidermist will buy a foam mannequin and they
Yeah.
basically glue skin to it, right? When I started, they didn't have foam mannequins. They actually made them out of plaster molds and they used paper mache or burlap in there. So it was very crude. And then when the first mannequins started being made, they weren't very good. And I've always had the idea, I still am now. I want to do the next thing. I want to get better. My attitude in life is every day I want to be better than the day I was before.
Love
I'm
it.
either going to get faster at the same thing or I'm going to get better at the same thing, but I'm never, ever going to reach a pinnacle. So anyway, I started sculpturing animals. So I'm sculpturing animals for myself in taxidermy. And that means you got to study the muscle structure. So a lot of people in my profession, they go and they copy what other people have done. You buy their product there, you sand down the floor and put a little bit of clay on, change it, that's yours.
Yeah.
My deal is I wanted to study what God made from scratch. And so I did what's called a lot of carcass casting. I'll just show you like right here. I just got back from Canada and this is a bear. This is a little bear that I shot and it was in the rain. Long story short, this is actually its heart here.
Yeah.
Backbone right in the cavity. And I'm getting ready to do a whole bunch more of that this fall. I'm going out to New Jersey to hunt bears, and then I'm going to Ohio to hunt deer. My son's going to northern Minnesota on bear. Because everything that I'm doing, Matty, I want it to be 100% fact, not my. Because if you get into this world of anatomy and where to shoot animals and how they die, it's all over the map. It's like religion is. My deal is no, this is science. There's got to be facts. So I've looked at my background of studying animals. That's what gives me the background to get into it. That's not why I started it, but that's my background. Now, to give you an example on sculpturing, dealing with black bears. There are 3 bears in a bear. Instead of Goldilocks and the 3 bears and the 3 chairs,
Yeah.
there's 3 bears. One is, as a sculptor, when I sculpture Reinhardt archery targets, I'm sculpturing the fur bear, the outside.
Yeah.
I had the first licensed chainsaw carving school in the United States where people take logs and they carve with a chainsaw. That's also carving the outside of the bear.
Yes. Yeah.
Taxidermist, and then I had my own taxidermy supply company where I sculptured what I call the carcass bear. In other words, you skin the animal, and then you've got the measurements, you've got the meat, bones, you've got everything there. And that's what I sculptured there to make fiberglass molds of, to reproduce out of foam to sell to taxidermists. And that was Revolution Taxidermy Supply.
Yeah.
The third bears, what I'm doing now, I'm sculpturing the inside of the bear,
Mm.
which has to do with the skeletal structure and the heart. So my background, having done all the outside things for the archery targets and chainsaws, and then also doing all the muscles for the taxidermy supply company, Revolution, it was a no-brainer for me to take the next step on the inside because I was a hunter and I've always examined the inside of them. So that was the new. And then what had happened is I invented a shooting system where I could, and it's patented, and I can tell you within a quarter of an inch, now this is on a white-tailed deer, where the perfect kill shot is, no matter how high in the tree you are, no matter what angle the deer is turned, I can tell you within a quarter inch the absolute perfect shot.
So all based on angles, essentially, in the sense
Well, yes, it's complicated. It's based on angles, but it's also based upon anatomy. So you've got angles as part of the equation. Yes. The anatomy, of course, is the big part because what good does doing angles if you've got the wrong anatomy? It's also geared with a third thing, which is what I call center kill technology. So you take the angles, center kill technology, and anatomy to put it together, and it's patented.
Yeah, cool.
So, yes, and that's a come if I was there in Australia, some of the different animals. I would love to be able to study them, to be able to have the same thing there. Like here in Texas, they've got a lot of exotic animals down there in Texas, and they've got an animal down there. I think it's from, where's it from? Japan. It's called the nilgai.
Yeah,
because
great big animal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great big animal. It's real gray. It's got a real small head. It's basically put together like somebody made a mistake. And the body parts don't match from my perspective, from how the way I would design something. Okay. But they claim the lungs on those go real far forward. I went down to Texas to do a little bit of research. I saw one set of lungs a little bit on them, but it was outside the cavity. That didn't matter. But my thing is to do the research to know exactly where everything is at. And that's how come one of the things on the Anatomy Hunter, the main thing that I'm working on is called the Perfect Kill Shot Documentation Project. And what that is, Matty, is this. I want to have 1,000 animals that are shot with a bow and arrow that are recorded on camera with lighted nocks. So just like what you see a hunting show on TV, okay? The difference then is after the TV show, them seeing where it was hit, we then examine the animal and we start on the outside. You take the front leg of the animal, you bring it down so it's like when it was just standing there on all fours, because the front leg is a reference. So we've got to know where that is at. I then take a stick and I put it in the entrance hole and I roll it over. I do it in the exit hole. So now we're starting to see what we saw on camera. And now we're seeing on the dead carcass, on the fur. So then you skin it out. And then now you've got the carcass there, it's hung up. And I try to skin it out with the guts in it. Now you can see exactly where the hole is. And you got to take perfect pictures so you see that there. Then when it's gutted, we examine the exact angle or the exact organs that it hit. And then we take a look at exactly what rib that it went in at. In other words, bears have 14 ribs, deer have 13. So then we go in and we mark, okay, it went in 13th rib here. I put a protractor on its back and I see the trajectory angle because they're never broadside. So they're always going ahead or going forward. So all of this is monitored to make a library. So let's say you came to the States here and you wanted to hunt a black bear. The goal of this is you'd be able to go to my website and you'd watch all these shows on all these bears, and you'd be able to pick, when I get the library done, frontal shots or rear shots, gut shots, far back, that you'd actually pick the body parts, and you'd get to watch all these videos and you'd see everything being documented. And my goal is to have 1,000 animals documented like that. So it takes away any question whatsoever. And I just came back from speaking at that International Bear Sports Show last weekend. And when I was there, I played a video of 5 bears being shot. And I went through and then I asked a real simple question. These are all bear hunters, bear outfitter type people. I said, how many of you believe this animal was harvested? And how many of you believe that the animal didn't die and we didn't get it? And then I asked them what organs they think they hit. And out of the 5 bears, I don't think, well, as far as I know, nobody came close to getting them all right. Because what you think you see is one thing, and then knowing where the anatomy is, especially on a black bear, is completely different than a deer. And you want to know why it is? It's something I just discovered this spring. A bear is different than a deer, because of course my background's mostly deer. I studied whitetail deer. But a bear will hunch up, like this one I've got right to the side right here. Do you see this here?
Yep.
I'll take this over here. I'll try to get this where you can see now. I got to get this It's backwards to me here. There, can you see it? Is that pretty good
I
there?
can, yeah. So essentially just the bear on all fours, but he's curved over with his back.
Yes. What happens is I played a video and it showed the bear hunched up like that, and he shot it back in the guts, way back by the back, in front of the back leg, way back there. Then we took the same bear after we skinned it out, and again, we monitored where it was shot. We hung it up, and the hole in the carcass was about in the dead middle of the bear. So instead of saying way is in the dead middle, how could that be? Now, remember, you're taking something like a pool noodle and you're bending it like this when it was alive. And when you hang it up with all the weight of the guts in it, now you're doing the opposite. You're stretching it out really long this way. And then when we gutted it, we showed he hit the lungs, and nobody believed he could hit the lungs. How can you hit the lungs that far back? When they're balled up like that, their rib cage gets pushed back farther and their back end comes closer. So the whole bear scrunches together. So it looks like a rear shot, actually wasn't. So and that's how, and we did that over and over. We have five bears and I think two deer, I think that we did to get people to see this. But then I go through and I take the organs out and I show it. So there's absolutely no doubt about it.
It is very interesting. I think there's a few ways I want to go with this. Bear in particular, it seems like their lung is a much bigger item compared to deer or even a pig, for instance. It just seems like it takes up a lot more of the space of the actual cavity there. Is that true to some degree or not really?
It's true, but remember, I'm still doing my research. And the big difference on a bear and a deer is in the front. And I can show you this over here if I can get this turned right. Okay. I take this off here. I can take this actually out. Do you see in the front how pointed this is?
Yeah, so essentially the lungs come to, it's like a teardrop where the point is in the front. Yep.
I call it pear shape.
Yep.
That's exactly right. Okay. So that's in this, these are the, just so you know, for my research, these are the ribs from this bear, this meat, this dirty meat that you see right here. That is the meat from the actual broadhead where I shot it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not plastic. I didn't reproduce it. That is the exact spot. Same thing on the inside where I hit them. So everything I'm doing, I'm trying to reproduce as perfectly as possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, on a deer, I'll try to take this over here on the deer. Try to go slow. Okay. Okay. How am I going to turn that there like that? Is that looking okay there like that?
Yeah, I can see it. Yep.
Okay, I've got that there. So I'm going to take off the front shoulder. We can deal with those there. Okay. What I want you to see here, if I can bring this down, do you see how broad this is here?
Yep.
This is much bigger on a deer in the front than it is on a bear.
Interesting.
Because,
so the very front of the rib cage essentially is what we're talking about here.
Oh, it's taller on the first rib. Now, the reason that makes a difference is people shoot bear forward and they don't get them. Well, they come to more of a point, so you can shoot below the lungs or above the lungs much easier. So when you go back farther, when you go over here and you see the bear here, the lungs do tend percentage-wise to be bigger in the back, but everything is a pendulum. And how far back do you go?
Exactly.
And that is what I'm in the process of wanting to find out. So when we went hunting to Canada last year, I had 3 tags that I bought from a guy, and I didn't get a chance to hunt, and we only got 1 bear. But what we're trying to find out is what they call in bears the middle of the middle. And of course, we're trying to define what in the world does that even mean. When I was at the Bear Sports Show, there's no scientific definition of what that is. But the bottom line, it's super, super controversial where you shoot a bear. The bear that I shot right here, that I shot right above the heart, I showed that to a bear guide. He's a dog tracker, so he tracks deer and bear with his dogs. He said, I guarantee you, because I showed him the live shot of it. I didn't tell him who got the bear, that it was mine. He says, I guarantee you that bear lived. And it was shot right above the heart, okay? He believes shoot all the way back to the last rib. And he was actually in the seminar that was there, but I didn't want to embarrass him because I don't want to embarrass anybody. That's not
See, and to me, this is that.
Lost the sound again. I got the video.
We should be, there we go. So this is where I feel like there is not a disconnect, but it's like when you look at a lot of the American footage, I feel like they are trained and educated to shoot further back. And for instance, a quartering on shot. So an animal that is slightly turned towards them, they will aim behind the shoulder rather than going through the center of the cavity on that angle there. It seems like at least a lot of the elk shooting.
Is that on my half too, Matty?
No,
That's just mine. We're having difficulties on and on today.
I'm following you on the frontal shot. Now, you brought on frontal shots from the National Bowhunter Education Foundation, which deals with anatomy and shot placement, which I've had some dealings with. They do not recommend any shots unless they're perfectly broadside or quartering away. No frontal shots.
But even on
So
a broadside shot, I would say that Americans would often shoot further back than what a lot of Australians are doing. Maybe it's on deer or bear. But if you're talking about deer in particular,
Okay.
what we're really talking about is the triangle that sits between where your bone structure sits. So if you pull that bone over, this is essentially the triangle in between the bone structure. So if you're
Devil's
talking
triangle is what I call it.
the devil's triangle, yeah, look at that.
Yep.
It's written on there. Devil's triangle. So that's where we're typically trying to aim in the animals that we're shooting. If you think about it on a broadside shot, you'd go middle of the front leg, go straight up the middle of the front leg and shoot in the bottom third of the deer. You're going to shoot around roughly the heart area. If the deer drops, you're still going to hit lung.
Okay. Now, I teach two different places to shoot.
Hmm.
One is people want to shoot them in the heart, right? That's just a common thing to heart shoot. So I teach where that is, and I call that the fire hydrant shot.
Yep.
Because if you take the artery off the top of the heart, the aorta,
Yep.
you leave the heart itself and figuring the heart is a pump, so it's still intact, a pump. You take the biggest pipe there is on the animal, because from there the blood comes up and it goes forward and back to the whole animal. You take that off, it's like hitting a fire hydrant and the blood goes everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is probably the quickest kill that you could have on an animal, besides hitting it in the brain or something like that. But the problem is, now here's what you're talking. Remember you talked about how pigs drop? Problem with that heart sitting in here like this. Okay, so let's say that's sitting in here like this, right?
Yep.
Not cover myself up when I'm doing it. So it's down here like this. When you shoot, a number of things happen. If the animal drops, now your arrow can go into the shoulder blade. Okay. Another thing that ends up happening is if people here hunting tree stands in Wisconsin, I don't know if it's 90%. It used to be 100%. Nobody hunted on the ground. Now there's ground blinds, but I would still say it's 75 to 90% of people hunting tree stands. So even a perfect heart shot, if the deer is close to you and it's a big buck with broad shoulders, to be able to make that heart shot, you're going to be coming right next to hitting the shoulder blade.
Yeah.
Okay?
Changes completely when you're talking about an overhead shot, right?
Yes, it does. It
Yeah.
does. So for me, all I try to do, Matty, is with my patent, I tried to figure this out. In fact, let me back up a little bit and kind of just ask a question. If you were to shoot at a paper plate that I put out on a hay bale 50 yards away, where specifically on that paper plate would you aim to hit it?
The first thought I had was straight for the middle.
Now, why would that be?
Just because if that's the object, it's not moving. It's why not aim for the middle
It
of
doesn't matter where you hit it. It doesn't matter where in the plate that you hit it. You still win if you hit the plate.
I guess because of the amount of room for error that you've got is bigger if you're aiming in the center.
Okay, so now take that attitude, philosophy, and take it to an animal. Okay, which basically means you take the heart, lung, and livers. If you take a look at that, if you can just see that sitting in space, the heart, lung, and liver here, and then that's what you want to hit, and then you cover or deduct the skeletal structure around it. In other words, the lungs go above the backbone. People don't believe that, but they go up higher. So you don't want that top lung shot because you hit the backbone and you only hit one lung. You go too far forward in the devil's triangle, absolutely killing shot, deathly. You got all the blood vessels are here. Absolutely a great shot, but it's a smaller target. So if you simply go here, just behind the bones here, just right here, if you go there, now if you hit high, you've got two things happen. You will not hit this, and the backbone on a deer, it descends from the back, going forward, going down. So when you go back farther, you're going to gain an extra half inch to an inch of height there. And
Yeah, I
where
see what you're
this
saying.
comes off.
What about the dead zone, the dead man, no man's land? Essentially, that is what a lot of people have called it. And I've definitely shot a deer broadside. It was a downhill shot, and it shot it essentially high and nothing. It walked up the hill and it kept feeding in front of me. And when I talked to people, all they could explain was you hit it in no man's land, and it was essentially, I would say, where you would think a lung would be, straight on the side. And it was like, if it was lower, that would have been a dead deer every day of the week. But it walked away in front of me. It ran away at first, and then it walked over and it was eating on the hillside next to me at 80 meters.
Now, let's take a look at this. What I need to prove to you what I'm telling you, I need that animal.
Yeah,
I need to be
agreed.
able to go back. You get that animal, you go, and then here's what we'd have to do. See, I want to prove this because remember, I'm not selling something. I don't have my beliefs I'm trying to defend. I'm just bringing forth the evidence that I've learned, that I've seen, that I can prove. In fact, I challenge you, I challenge everybody. Prove me wrong in anything I say, because if I'm wrong, I want to change because I want to be right.
Yeah.
So what we need is for you to get that animal, because there's thousands of animals every year that people say that are shot there. All we need to do is get that animal, take the lungs out of it and see, okay, there's no hole in the lungs. We put the arrow right back into where it came in and came out, and we say, okay, it went under the backbone, and so it did not hit any lungs, so that proves that there's a dead space there. I have never, ever seen that. In fact, I have got numerous proof. In one I don't have right here, but where my son was hunting at the end of our driveway late in the winter. There was snow on the ground. He shot this buck. He said, Dad, I came in, it ran 40 yards, it ran crooked, and it fell down dead at 40 yards. So I knew exactly what had happened. It ran crooked because he hit it in the backbone. And just if you hit your back right, you pinch it right there, you got a sort of paralysis, that's a pinch. So I hit it there, and it only ran 40 yards. I knew he hit the aorta, the major blood vessel, because that's attached to the bottom there.
Yeah.
We came in, and I've got all the evidence. I've got all his ribs all put back together, the actual ribs. And he came in a tree stand above the backbone and hit the backbone and actually chipped the backbone, but he hit the lung on the entrance side. So it's possible to come in from the top, and that happens a lot. Now, is it possible? Sure, but I've never had anybody show me lungs, not one bit of evidence to be able to prove that, where I have plenty of evidence where the lungs go above the backbone. And the reason they do is the lungs are actually, if you look at them from the end, they're actually heart-shaped. They're heart-shaped, and they come out of the backbone and they go up before they go down. And the lungs fill that cavity. And another reason for you to believe from a physiological standpoint, now we're getting into the medical aspect.
No, yeah, I love it. It's good.
Because, so let's talk about, if you're ready to get into lungs and how they die when they're shot there, this gets into a lot of depth. I don't want to go down a trail if it's going to bore you.
No, yeah, I like it. I'm for it. And I think the more educated we can be, even if it is somewhat sciencey, the better it's going to be. And I've got questions around the lungs as well, because, yeah, essentially they change in size too, right?
They do, and we can talk about that. But let's talk about how a deer dies when they're shot through both lungs. I call it the physiology of death. So we take a look at how that takes place. Now, how do you think it takes place? Let me start out by asking you questions if I can.
I would assume essentially that because you've popped the lungs or the wall of it, that it's no longer able to take in oxygen and fill and expand like it's meant to. So therefore, when you breathe in, it's just escaping and it's not going to the location that it needs to go to. So therefore, it's no longer functioning the way that it should.
So like a balloon, they get hit and they pop, correct?
Correct.
That's a very common misconception of what takes place. And what I'm going to tell you is going to blow your mind, because it's all of this to me is so interesting because it's so complex. It's the opposite. So let's go back a little bit more. I want to set the stage if I can a little bit. So let's talk about when you breathe in and you breathe out, what is taking place in your lungs. Let's just talk about the normal function of you breathing right now.
Do you mean like the oxygen that's going in and expanding and contracting? Is that essentially what you're asking?
Yeah, tell me how your lungs work.
This is the interesting thing, and I guess maybe where you're going to with, and I might be wrong in assuming, but a balloon, you pop it, it goes short, it goes small. Obviously, it's not a filled space. It's not like it's hollow on the inside with a lung. All of the inside tissue is essentially a bunch of, I don't know the right scientific terms to it, but it's a lot of tissue. And so all of the oxygen is essentially being fed in and out of those, and they do somewhat contract and expand, is my understanding of the, at least.
Sure. But so let's take a look at how that works. When you breathe in, which makes your lungs get bigger, okay? What happens is the rib muscles, which are when you put ribs on the grill and you eat them, they're called the intercostal muscles. They actually pull the rib cage out. Your diaphragm pulls down. So what that does, that makes the thorax cavity, which is just from the diaphragm and the rib cage forward.
Yeah.
It makes it bigger. And there's a law called Boyle's Law, which basically says if you have a given space of molecules, if you make that space bigger, that creates negative pressure. And then the positive pressure that we breathe in our air, that we're breathing here, that will fill that void. Now it's bigger. When you exhale, your diaphragm goes down, your ribs come in. Now you're making that space smaller, and now you're making a positive air pressure, and it's pushing the air out.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not you going sucking the air in or blowing it out. Just the fact that your thorax cavity gets bigger and smaller is changing your pressure inside your lung cavity, the thorax, to positive and negative, positive and negative, positive and negative. Okay. So that makes sense. But now watch this. When you breathe out, like right now, if you went, you breathe out as much as you can and you relax, you suck your diaphragm up, your lungs are still inflated. Okay. Now, if we're breathing air in from the atmospheric air, now let's go back to your balloon analogy. You blow air into the lungs, but when you pop it, you open it up. When you open that up, all the air goes out. Even if you don't pop it, you just open it. But our lungs do not go down to nothing when we breathe out or we just breathe air in.
Correct, because it's tissue. It has to be there.
Very important. Why? Because this is I'm going somewhere with this and how they work. Arrow works to kill them on literally to deal with mechanical broadheads and fixed broadheads. That's how important understanding this is because of the rage broadhead and how all this works. What happens is the outside of the lung, where it meets the inside of the rib cage, there is a membrane there called a pleural membrane. And there's a space between the outside of the lung and the inside of the rib cage. It's not a void. It's just a membrane that has liquid in it. And as the transferring of that liquid going in and out, to me, it's almost an invisible thin membrane that's like a sock. So the lungs, as it expands and rubs in the ribs, it doesn't damage it. What it also does, Matty, in that space there, that's called the pleural space, it's a pleural membrane, it's a negative pressure. And what that does, that keeps the lungs, I'm going to use my terms, vacuum sealed, vacuum sucked, negative pressure to the outside of the rib cage. So when the lungs go in and out, what they do is they're vacuumed to the outside, but they go forward and back and they go in and out. They go in and out. When they go out with the intercostal ribs go out, they get wider. When they come in, and then the diaphragm, when it pulls back, that pulls them back. So that brings up to the point that when I tell people my models are not telling the truth, they're all lies. And they go, you made them. Why'd you make a bunch of lies? Because the body is moving. These lungs, as you said, they expand, they contract, they fill up, they go out. A friend of mine shot a doe. You could go on our website and watch. It's called Randy's 10.5 rib doe. And he shot that so far back, it was a 45-degree quartering shot because we get into angles. I'm into quartering. I want to know the exact degrees. And he hit it so far back, people thought there's no way he could hit the lungs. But what we did is we took the deer afterwards, and this is all the stuff they do. We inflated the lung where the hole in the lung lined up with the hole in the rib cage, and it was the 10.5 rib, and the lung went back farther, so it was easily past the 11th rib, okay? The next week he shot a deer, hit it in the same place in the lung, but it was the 7th rib. It was the 7th rib, and he hit the end of the lung. So what does that mean? Does that mean that the lung goes all the way back to the 11th rib, down to the 7th rib? I would say so. Could it be that some deer have bigger lungs than others? Could be. That's why, Matty, I need thousands. I need 1,000. So we see it over and over and over. And we know that's how far back it can go. And we also know that's how far forward that it can go.
Because the one thing I want to question then is based on
Yeah.
what we just talked about with the dead space, the no man's land, and
Yeah.
what you've just explained about the pressures and the liquids and everything contracting, what's the explanation there where you've shot through where I would think is somewhere along the spine? Are you saying essentially maybe it was shot when it was at full contraction, so the space was small and it shot behind that? Like, what's the deal there? How do you explain that part?
Number one, I don't have the animal, so
No, exactly. I know that's a hard one, but
really it's easy. It's just I tell people and they don't believe it because it's illusion. You actually went above the spine. The closer, and you shoot close, the closer you shoot to the shoulder blade, the more that spine comes down. Okay. If you take a look at, I'm going to bring this back to the deer here if I can. Okay. I got to hold this thing right here. I got to work in reverse to get it. Okay. How am I doing that right? Okay. Does that look okay?
yep,
I'm going to hold that one-handed here. Okay. I'm trying to get it so you can see it really good. Do you see these spiny dorsals here, how big they are?
I do.
When you see the animal, he's flat backed. So what happens is, do you see how small they are here in the back? It shows you the tallest part of the lungs are the highest on the animal, the farthest back. As they come forward, they swing down, but look in the front how low they are and how much space there is there in the top. Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens every time is people end up hitting here. They hit higher than they think, and they're going above it. So
This is a hard one because obviously this was many years ago, so I cannot remember the exact locations of the deer, but I remember it wasn't in line with the middle front shoulder. It was definitely further back. So I would say, let's say that what you're saying is correct. At what point does it actually does it actually affect the animal in the spine? Because if you're taking out spinal bones, but you're not touching the cord, is that where the effect happens?
of course, it's that simple. Shot a bear this spring. I made a bad shot on it. I blame it on my glasses, blah, blah, blah. My broadhead went through and it came within an eighth to a quarter of an inch of where I would have hit the spinal cord. So the bear went away. He came back an hour and 45 minutes later, not phased at all. If I'd have come down just that little bit more and hit that spinal cord, you could have a total paralysis or a partial paralysis. Sometimes an animal will go down or they're paralyzed your spine and then they get up and they run away. There's different degrees depending on where you hit, what you hit. So
Essentially pinching nerves or something like that.
yeah, and the spinal cord sits on top of the backbone. You've got the backbone vertebrae, and then the spinal cord column sits. In fact, I could take this out of a bag here. I don't know how much time and detail you want me to spend on this.
Right, yeah, if I've got the time, if you've got the time.
This is actually the bear. Okay. This is the one that I just shot.
Yep.
I don't know how close I can get this for you to see here. I lift that up there. Can you see the broadhead cut?
Lift up. Yep. Oh,
There
yep.
we go. Right across the top. Can you see that line where it cut through there? Look at that. And now I'm going to turn it on the end. And there you're going to see, here's the spinal column here.
Yeah.
But right there on the top is where the cord fits.
Yep.
And that's where the paralysis comes. And you can see how close I was, but I didn't get it.
Mm.
And then again, this is going to show you the rib. You see it from on front, how the rib actually goes up and the rib comes out above the bottom of the backbone, and the lungs are sucked to the inside of that rib cage.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. One of the ways that, and I guess, let's talk about your concepts of the most lethal. You talked about before the two shots that you
Yes.
educate people in shooting. So let's talk about the two lethal shots that you were essentially explaining for people. What are they taking out?
The first one we already talked about, which is probably what you do. You want to shoot them instead of in the heart. You want to shoot them on top of the heart.
Correct.
Hit the aorta. That's the fire hydrant shot. And I know people shoot that there. I don't recommend it because the animal can drop and you've got to be a good shot. But who am I to tell you if you're a crack shot and you can hit a mosquito there and you know you can make it and it's the quickest kill and you're going to hit it there and it's going to just boom, the blood's going to come flying out of it. Who am I to tell you not to take that shot? I'm not the moral police. But back to the paper plate analogy. Here's my thing I'm trying to find, Matty. Where's the place on the animal that I can shoot and still miss high, low, right, or left and kill that animal? That's what I call the perfect kill shot. And that's going just behind that shoulder blade where I still have the major part of the lungs. The catch is, though, people that shoot for the heart and they go back, if you shoot low, do you know how close that liver comes to the bottom of the heart? We've got, if you go on my website, you check out Gavin's Doe. It's another one of these trick ones where a guy shoots it. I just did it in the seminar last week in Minnesota. I said, where do you think this animal was hit, this doe that he shot? And they go, the heart. Almost everybody thought it was the heart. But what happened was he actually hit the liver. They can't believe it. That liver sits all the way back up to the kidney on the top, but it angles down. And on the deer was bent forward again. If you have a full stomach, or if you're a pregnant woman, or I lost 50 pounds, you're fat, that can push all that. When you exhale, the stomach is there. That pushes that right up there. In fact, I'll show you. This here, do you see what this is here? This is the actual diaphragm. The liver on a deer sits on the right-hand side. This is the left side. But let's just say the liver's on this side. This was the bear that I shot. And this is the next day. When we shot it up in the hills, we took all the meat off it. We just threw the carcass back there for me to work on it the next few days because I wanted to mold its heart. Its stomach bloated, and that was like a full stomach, and it pushed it forward. But do you see how close this comes to the liver?
Yeah.
Well, when Gavin's doe, he came in like a heart shot, but the arrow angled back, and it just missed the heart, and it hit the lung. Or it didn't hit the lung, it hit the liver. Now, remember I told you how the lungs fill up that thorax cavity?
Yep.
And remember I told you I'm on a journey and I don't know it all?
Definitely.
There's two things I have found that do not fit with what I'm doing. And here's the deal, this you'll like. I was given a seminar down in Georgia, and they said, if you come down and speak in the seminar, we'll let you hunt pigs on this ranch there. It's a high fence deal. They feed these pigs. And you know me, I don't know what my wife thinks I got problems because I just love these pigs. I really do. And so I was down there and we shot 3 of them. And I told them what I want to have for the seminar is I don't want to talk. I want to have the actual dead pigs in the seminar we shot. So then you and I are there. Okay, Matty, here we go, buddy. Here's where the arrow went in. Here's where it came out. And I still left the lungs on the inside there. Okay. I had a thoracic surgeon, a cardiothoracic, a heart lung surgeon that was in the that I met talking to her. I says, can you stay for my seminar? And I want you to find anything I say that's wrong. Because I don't have a medical background. I just do my research. And plus we're teaching, I'm a layman, so it makes it easier for me to teach other people because I don't care about the real depth stuff. So here's what happened on this pig. The guy shot it back, the cameraman that was there assigned to me for the week. He hit it back in the guts. It angled forward and it came out right behind the heart, just the opposite of this. It came out here. So he went through the guts, through the liver, because pigs have got bigger livers and they're not just on one side. They're more like a bear liver than a deer. It went through and it came out through the diaphragm. And the diaphragm on the inside of that cavity is supposed to be solid lungs. It went through there, it came out, and there's no hole in the lungs. In Gavin's doe that was real low in the bottom here, there was no hole in the lungs. And both of them at the back of the lungs had a black strip on the lung, which I'm assuming was blood that for whatever physiologically took place was pressurized in the back of that lung. And when they die, that's called a hemopneumothorax. We get into lung collapse a little bit more on that there because we can't broadheads and how this works before we're done, Matty. We have to have that.
Okay.
But anyway, that disproves my understanding of physiology of those lungs filling up that total thorax cavity with them being sucked to the outside. Because in 2 instances, one in a pig and one in a deer, hit real low by the heart, and right behind it low, the arrows went through there and did not hit any lung. So the theory is, if that case, it didn't hit there, why couldn't it be up along the back? Maybe it could be, but there's no evidence with the zillions of deer that have been shot. Nobody's brought them in and actually shown that I'm aware of. And I've been doing this and people are challenging me and stuff. So it's, and yet I've seen over and over, it hit the backbone, hit the lung. I see that all the time, almost every year.
So you're saying essentially if the diaphragm wall is broken, that's also going to have the same negative effect on the lungs that it would if you had a long shot.
No. Actually, an animal can live that's cut through the diaphragm. If you talk to a veterinarian and they get a cow or something that's got barbed wire that they ate and it goes up and it punctures the diaphragm, the animal can live. Because remember, the air, we never got back to how the lungs collapsed then, did we? Do you want to go there?
Yeah.
Okay, here, it's just the opposite of a balloon. The lungs collapse from the outside in, not the inside out. In other words, that suction that's on the outside of the lung, the inside of the rib cage, that pleural cavity, that membrane, that keeps the lung sucked out. The air has to get in that space. So when you shoot them with the broadhead, and this is where a mechanical broadhead, why, again, I use rage because that's been the common mechanical for years. They have failures. They have things they hit, they bounce off. They've got all the negative side to them. But what they do have for them is they make a great big hole.
Wide. Yeah, very wide.
Very big. And that allows air to get in between the rib cage in the lung, and it breaks that negative pressure. And when it breaks that negative pressure, literally the air pressure will push that lung down. And then when the animal breathes back in, the diaphragm can push that air back out. So there's literally a war going on. In fact, if you're going down the road and you see somebody just got in a car accident, they got a broken rib and they've got a collapsed lung, what they'll tell you to do is to take out a credit card. And when they breathe out, when they breathe in, you take the credit card off them so the diaphragm can go back and push that air out. Then when they want to breathe, when they breathe in, it's that way. Because if they breathe in, you close it so the air can fill up the lung because you don't want it to come into the cavity. But when they exhale, you want to open it up so that air can go back out. And that is what the guy who's my editor is a professional pig killer in Texas. Like him and his partner killed like 900 last year. And I'm sure, do they do it over there? They use dogs, they catch them, they stick them with a knife.
Yeah.
What he started to do, I got to be very careful how I phrase this, but they stick them in a knife and kill them. And they hit one in the lung one time. And then he started going with this to try to see if my theory on this is true, that you could actually cut them in the lung, not cut the lung, just cut a big hole there, not hit them in the heart. And they die of a double lung pneumothorax.
Did you say cut by the lung, but not actually touch the lung?
Just cut rib cage with a big hole, not touching the lung, but so air gets in there. And then what he showed is with that big hole, those lungs would collapse when they breathe back in. Then the lungs would pop right outside that hole, and they would quiver and go back down. It's something you don't want to show because that's not a good thing. The dog's got it by the ears and they stick the knife. That is not
no, it's not a pretty thing to watch. Yeah.
And it's not a pro hunting thing for us to talk about, but they do it all the time. I just saw the meat eater just do it a few days ago. He went to, I don't know, it might've been Australia. I'm not sure where it was that he went, Australia or New Zealand.
New Zealand, maybe. Yeah.
But anyway, they had a guy that goes out there and he hunts them with the dogs, and they do it in Texas all the time. They do it that way. But so he started doing some of that by hitting the big hole in the lungs. And what he found is that those lungs the air coming in there can collapse those lungs, even though he didn't cut the lung. And that gets into their dying when they're hit in the lungs for two main reasons, three really. One is the blood. When you hit the lungs, there's capillaries there, there's blood there. If you have major blood vessels, they'll die quicker, but you can go through the lungs and not hit a major blood vessel, but they're still going to die because when those lungs collapse, it's not their breathing. Everybody thinks like the diaphragm, they can't breathe, that's why they die. No, all you gotta do is watch an animal. When it goes there to die, say a deer, it generally will run, let's say 100 yards, it'll get wheezy, it'll fall down, it'll try to get up, it'll flop for a little bit. You never see them having trouble. You never see them have trouble breathing, they just die. What's happening is the lungs collapse. They collapse, and on a dead animal, watch it the next time you got an animal, the lungs as they collapse go around the heart. Everything goes to the heart. Everything comes down and around the heart. When that collapses, it literally, from the outside pressure, it pushes the heart forward. So the blood cannot come back from the neck. When the animal's standing upright, the blood cannot get back to the heart. The blood cannot circulate back through the lungs because now all the blood vessels in the lungs are constricted. So in other words, it's a lack of oxygen to the brain. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, but that is basically what ends up happening. So when they die shot through the lungs, it's a combination of a pneumothorax, a hemopneumothorax, which just means blood in the lungs, and blood loss. But it is not to do with the fact that they can't breathe. That is the end result of it. But the death is actually caused from that lack of oxygen that cannot go back out there. And a doctor explained to me one time, is if you ran as fast as you could, as hard as you could, and you start getting dizzy, like that's what's happening. Somebody gets hit and they're seeing white. I'm sure you've had that happen. You about get knocked out. That's a lack, or you get up real fast from a couch, a lack of oxygen. That's what happens, except there's no recovery. It's a lack of oxygen, you go down and they're out.
Yeah. I guess I'm still hung up on the forward-backward shot of the triangle.
Okay. And that if you can make it, it's just a smaller target.
It is, but why not aim for the middle of that triangle instead? Because you've still got space then to move forward and backwards.
Thank you for asking that. If you go here in the States, it's a really big thing. It's a big business in the hunting community.
Definitely. I think you've got 30 million registered bow hunters.
And you know how many dog trackers you've got? You have a ton of people that are waiting in line. People shoot a deer, they can't find it. They call a dog tracker and he tracks them.
Yeah.
They will tell you the number one shot that they get that they do not recover. Okay. If they're shot in the guts, they get 90 to 100% recovery rate. If you don't push the animal and it goes on somebody's property or something like that, animal's going to die. The dog's going to find it. The ones they don't get are the ones shot in the shoulder. And they're shot in the shoulder because they're up in a tree and they just shot high because it's a smaller kill zone. And two, the animal drops. And when it drops, the perfect heart shot now is in the shoulder. My daughter shot a deer last year in a ground blind at 17 yards. And it's in Australia, so I can say this. She won't watch this. She hit it in the top of the heart, made the fire hydrant shot. The deer made 2-3 jumps, went 10 yards, and just stood there, didn't know what happened, and just tipped right over because all the blood came out, right? Mm-hmm. We went and we replayed it. Her shot was down, would have hit the humerus bone, low. The humerus bone,
the one that travels.
He would hit right
forward here, on the shoulder, essentially, yeah.
It dropped like this, and it went into the heart.
Yep.
It caused a little bit of trouble. Are you telling me I made a bad shot? No, I didn't say that. But the reality is that when they drop, they get hit in the shoulder blade. And then the other thing that happens is they say the shoulder blade stops it. If you take a look at what's right behind the shoulder blade here, it's the backbone. So the arrow will go through the shoulder blade and stick in the spine, and they blame it all on the shoulder blade. But it's really both of them, the shoulder blade, then all the meat, and then the spine. That is the reason why I recommend back farther. Now, if you put the shot in there, it's going to die quicker in there because you're still going to hit the lungs, and you've got all the blood vessels coming out from the heart going every which way. You got the bronchiocephalic trunk that goes forward, the aorta that comes up but goes back. They both come out of the heart. So that area is just lethal. Same thing in the frontal shot. If you make that frontal shot and you get it, you've got it. But I did a video tonight on the bear for my reels, and I took the rib cage of a deer out there. Instead of sideways, I turned it up like this. You're literally shooting through the sternum, just like in a human.
Yeah, a small little space to be able to shoot.
You're shooting at the heart. If you get a bit angle, you get through one lung. Oh, we haven't talked about the next thing on the mediastinum, how they die, how they live. Why do they live on a single lung shot? That's enough. There's so much to this, Matty. I don't want to.
No, I like it. It's good to go in depth because I've seen goats and pigs in particular live on one lung.
So you have the dog trackers, who are the ones that know far more than me because they've got the experience. They claim that single lung shots, I heard just this last weekend, will live like up to 90% of the time. But again, you could get a single lung and hit a major blood vessel in that, and it dies. The faster the animal runs and the more it's pushed, the more, just like anything else, if you get shot, you get hurt.
Adrenaline.
What do they do? Stay calm and don't move. Mm-hmm. So if you push the animal, it's more likely to die. But if you don't have a blood trail, it goes on the neighbor's property, it goes a long ways away, it may die, but you won't find it, which is why they just tell you to wait half an hour. Mm-hmm. But if you literally had a dog and you could go wherever you wanted and it was single lung, and that's what some of the people are doing right now. They're getting on him right away and trying to push him to get him to die. But on the other hand, it's let's let the animal be for half an hour. And if it's going to live, we'll just back out and we'll just let it live, as opposed to trying to push it and trying to kill it by making it go through the exhaustion and all the stress that's on it.
So you saying that an animal that it hasn't been hit in the lung, where I'm saying it's lived on one lung shot? Is that what you're essentially saying?
It can hit on one lung. The other thing is that lung can heal up the hole, and that lung can reinflate.
Yes, so they can live off of one lung is essentially what we're both saying. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
90% of the time, the dog trackers told me last weekend, they believe it's up to 90% of the single lung shots the deer lives.
Yeah. No, I would agree. That's definitely a statement of truth in the sense of, yeah, goats and pigs, I've seen it many times over where they've only been hit in the one lung and they survive.
Okay, now let me ask you this. Why would a pig, because you're not hunting them in a tree stand, how would they only be hit in one lung?
I guess shot angles, if you misjudge your shot angle, and depending on which shot you're taking, the way that I always try to explain when you're saying it to a new person of a bow hunter, for instance, like this is the tissue box, which is the chest cavity. And in the middle of the tissue box is where the heart is located, where we've got the lungs located, which we're always trying to center through or always trying to hit that as a positioning. So I guess in this circumstance, what they've done is they've just misjudged the angle and only hit on one angle, one lung. Or if it was, for instance, a front-on shot, so we go onto the frontal shot and they've gone down the side of the heart and hit one lung instead.
Okay. Is it ever the situation that you don't get enough penetration, so you only go in far enough to hit one lung? You didn't get in deep enough to hit the other lung?
I don't think so. From the examples
Really?
that I've seen, I wouldn't think so because you've either seen pass through or you've got the arrow. So a lot
What
of
about mechanicals? Because a lot of mechanicals don't give, you see the deer running away with the arrow sticking way out when they use mechanical broadheads.
correct, yeah, like a light arrow mechanical broadhead doesn't get much penetration.
And so that's where they get, when I say a lot of single lungs, that's a situation that happens there. In fact, there's a big group here in America, and they switched from rage broadheads because they made perfect shots, but they didn't get the penetration. So now they've gone to more of a Kayuga, what I call a solid broadhead, one that's nothing's going to break it or stop it or fail.
Yeah, yeah, and I think given the amount that Australians hunt, that's what we're always looking for. Something that's going to do the job and something that's repeatable, something that like a lot of people aim for pass throughs. That's what we're really aiming for here because two holes is bigger and better than one hole. And if you talk to your breathing example of what you were saying about the lungs, the
Yes.
holes, it makes perfect sense. So a lot of the time, most hunters are aiming for that double, or sorry, a complete pass through. So you've got the double hole happening. On the boars is where it actually probably gets held up the most here in Australia, I'd say. Like buffalo, yes, but I would almost think if you can shoot through the thickest fighting pad on a boar, you're going to be able to shoot through a buffalo, no worries, if you hit it in the right spots.
But let me ask you this. You were talking about that Cayuga broadhead, the one particular one that you could push it through way easier than any of the other
The
ones.
Zot, correct. A two blade, double bevel.
Would that be the one that if you're hog hunting, is that the one you would use because of that reason?
No, I honestly use the pilot cuts, which is it's the one that you can put the bleeder in. So I actually use a pilot cut with a bleeder blade because it does the most damage and because it's a single bevel, you get more rotation. So it's hitting, it's rotating, it's doing the most damage in total or totality, I would expect. It's a sharp broadhead. I always make sure the razor sharp. So we're also doing any extra veins or capillaries or whatever it is that it's taking out on the way through as well.
And you get, what pound bow do you shoot?
70 pound.
So you're shooting 70 pounds. So are any of these great big boars, would your arrow not pass through them at 70 pounds?
I've definitely been held up on the backside of, so if you're shooting through broadside, being held
Yep.
up on the back fighting pad or the back shield from where they're facing me.
So it didn't get all the way through and come out the other side.
Correct. Yes.
So it went through the entrance shield fighting pad, but the exit fighting pad stopped it from coming out. So you only had one hole.
Caught up on, yeah, say the veins have been caught up. So it's hanging out the other side. But yes,
Oh, but the
correct.
broadhead made it through. You did have two
Broadhead.
holes.
Yeah, got you. Yes. Yes. The other example of this is getting stuck in the opposite shoulder then. People shoot through and smack it in the opposite shoulder.
Yeah.
But still, you still see the death of it, right?
Yeah, sure. You hit both lungs. Now, what about, do you think like a bull like mine on those animals? I've only got 54 and a half pounds. What would that do in a big pig?
It would still do the, if you're shooting at the right spot, it's still going to die.
But would it go through, it only go through the one shield?
Probably one shield, take out both. Like you'd take out the vitals. If you're hitting straight through and getting stuck on the other
I
side,
got,
you're
I've
still
got to
taking
through the shield. Now, here they'll tell you down south when you shoot a boar, you wait till they're quartering away and you want to hit them back by the guts.
shooting through the soft part. Yeah.
Do you guys do that too?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Quartering away, quartering on. Quartering away is not really going to, sorry, quartering on is not a shot that a lot of people take because it's such a short window for, it's a shorter entry point. But a quartering away shot, lots of people take those shots because it is essentially a wider position, but you're, like you said, you're trying to come in behind the ribs. So you're shooting the animal so much further back and trying to aim through. Once again, thinking about the exit, if we go back to my tissue box analogy, thinking about where you're going to be exiting so you've got the right angle, because obviously a quartering away shot is anything from, if we're saying this is the tail end, it's anything from that to that, right? Like you've got such a broad stance on it, so you have to make sure your angles are always right.
Have you ever done that on a pig?
Yes, yep, very lethal shot.
Oh, so you've done that, hitting them way back and going forward in it.
Yeah, correct. Yes, very, yeah, many times.
Wow, that's good. Now, another thing we didn't mention that's important is if you get enough penetration to get one lung, but you get just next to the other lung, there's a membrane that separates the right lung from the left lung that goes from the backbone to the sternum. It's called the mediastinum. And that's how they can live on a single lung. Because remember, we talked about that air pressure gets in or collapses the lung. Why does it collapse the other lung? And that's because each one is in their own pleural cavity.
Yeah.
So the thorax cavity's got two cavities called pleural cavities. The mediastinum allows that to take place. My son, when he was young, he's born 2 pounds, 15 and a half ounces. He was on a breathing machine and they put too much pressure there and it popped one of his lungs. But he lived because he had that other lung there. If he wouldn't have had a mediastinum, that air that would have got into that lung cavity there would have got into the other one. They both would have collapsed. So if that's how come on the Rage Broadheads, they don't get as much, and I'm using the Rage for a mechanical just because there's so many people use them. I'm not getting paid. I don't know.
No.
I'm trying to, but anyway, if you get not much penetration, but you get enough to cut through the one lung and just tear the membrane of that mediastinum, the air can infiltrate through the hole where the entrance lung is. It can then get into the second lung, even though it's not cut, get in there and cause it to collapse and kill it. Even so, it can die of a single lung, a double lung death, even though only one lung was hit. Isn't that incredible?
It is. It's actually very, very interesting. And I guess once again, this is where I go back to the triangle and why not shoot further forward then? Because if they were shooting further forward, wouldn't they then also hit the heart?
Absolutely. Your point on all that is right. But the other side of the coin is it's a smaller area to hit.
Yeah. I guess like from my standpoint, if you're going out hunting, you've got a responsibility. And so why not do the practice that you should be doing to be a good archer and be that shooting at 20 meters, 30 meters, 40 meters. I think that's why so many Australians say, like, we'd like to take shots at 20 meters or under, because we know that the degree of angle that the degree of stuffing up is not going to be anywhere near as bad as if it's at 30 meters. Like, you've got more of a chance of failing.
I love that. I love that, Matty. I love that.
Yeah, and I think in a sense, I'm not trying to have a go, but it's almost like the standard needs to lift in general. I think what you're doing is great because you're trying to say, okay, if we can shoot the middle of the plate, the degree of angle of the failure degree goes down a lot, which is awesome, which is what, once again, we want more success in hunting. But then why not lift the standard in general and say, okay, why don't we all do better?
I'll tell you what you just said, the first I've ever heard. And one of my goals is I want to have a 5-arrow project. I haven't come up with a name for it, but I want to have it as a goal that, because you shoot a big buck and you have your tusks, right? I want to have another one. You let 5 arrows leave your bow and there's 5 dead animals. No second shots, no misses, no cripples.
Yeah.
Because your attitude teaches that, because if I don't think I can make that shot for sure, I won't do it. Where people here constantly are shooting long distances and they can hit them on a target. But even if you make the perfect shot at, say, 50 yards on a deer, not only can it drop, it can take off and you can miss the whole animal.
Yeah.
So that gives me, I'm going hunting down in Ohio and 25 yards is my longest shot. And I practice at 40, but I don't trust that animal is not going to move at that distance.
Yeah.
So an elk is a bigger animal and they don't tend to jump the string as much and their target's twice as big. So that's an elk at 40 is supposed to be the same as a deer at 20. So that's come, I'm going elk hunting, and so I'm practicing there. But on a deer, I don't want to cripple them.
No,
and
exactly.
Your Australian's attitude about being close and making the perfect shot because you're taking easy shots and passing up the bad ones, that's part of the culture change that you're talking about that I believe needs to take place over here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess there's a lot of pressure on the Americans in the sense of you've got one tag, one deer, one opportunity to get it.
You get it once a year, and I'll tell you what, to be a hypocrite. You wait there all the time. I'm telling you all this stuff. A deer comes, it's take it or not. I let the arrow fly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard thing to battle yourself with, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And you're killing yourself. You're right. It's easy to sit here and talk about it. When that animal's in front of you, you got the bow pulled back. Do I shoot or don't I? Bam. You just flick your finger and the shot goes off.
Yeah.
So
the last buck that I shot, the last fallow deer buck, I've got him right here. My biggest and best buck that I've ever shot. Absolutely blown away with him. He's a big, it doesn't even fit on the camera. There you go. Big and wide, big paddles, very great deer. Like probably one of the best deer in Australia that I'm going to shoot in the sense of a fallow deer. Maybe not, maybe yes, I don't know. But essentially when I shot him, it was a 20-meter shot. He was slightly downhill. So I've entered high on one lung and exited out through the triangle on the other lung. Sorry, that's where the exit was. So out through the triangle. So it would have collected both lungs on the way through. He was in a herd of other bucks. So they'd bachelored up. This was hunting outside of the rut in the winter. And essentially what happened is the herd was with him and they all ran off. A big pack of them, probably, let's say 20 deer, ran down this hill, across this flat, and you could see he was getting wobbly, but he went out into the pack. They all went right. He went left and he collapsed on the field. It still took him probably 250 meters to die. And the hard thing with this, or I guess the thing that I'm trying to point out, is if that is in thick wooded country or in big bushland that we would say essentially, it would have been a very hard tracking process because there wasn't a lot of blood going everywhere. There wasn't a lot of, yeah, there wasn't a blood trail to be able to follow. And so in that circumstance, like if it was really thick timber, I may have lost that deer, but it was lucky that it was big and wide and open. Based on what we've just talked about with the lungs and everything, what do you think's happening in that circumstance where he's got a massive rush of adrenaline? He's running fast because he's with the other deer, but it took him still, let's say 20, I haven't actually timed it. I've got it on film, so I should. But from when the shot happened to when he went, it was probably 30 seconds, something like that before he died.
The lungs didn't collapse as quick.
But if you've gone through both lungs, what's the deal there?
Remember, the air's got to get in there to collapse them. And then when he runs, the air can get pushed. It is possible. It is possible. This is another story for an animal to be able to push that air out of that cavity so the lungs don't collapse. Because remember, what had me start the Anatomy Hunter, Matty, we're talking about my background, but what had me start it was I shot an elk and I double lunged him. I did, and I couldn't, and he was out in the open and I never found him. I looked for him for 3 days. I paid some friends of mine. I said, I'll pay you $500 if you can find him, if they had dogs. This is in Montana, an elk. And I got him up to 1,000, up to 1,500, 2,000. Long story short, they found him. I didn't get to see the bones. I got to see pictures. I got his antlers on my living room, but I didn't get to see the bones till a year later when I got a tag to go back there to do it. But he went a quarter mile. But he ran. My broadhead blade broke off, so I went through as a big animal. I went through with just 2 blades. It was an Exodus broadhead. The animal stayed calm. There ended up becoming no blood. He bled right at first and it stopped. So if that hole can seal up and enough of when he goes, that air is breathing in and out, gets pushed out, and then it seals up, so not much air is getting in there. Then to get the air to the outside of the lung, you know what happens? He's got to breathe it through his mouth. The air's got to go through the hole in the lungs and migrate to the outside of the lungs between the rib cage for that to get that pressure to go in there. And those lungs tighten right up. That's how come I can take them when they're shot through the lungs quite a few times, not always. I put an air compressor in there or a bicycle pump, and I pump the lungs up, even though a hole's been through the lungs. As long as I don't hit a major air vessels like trachea where it splits, where it bifurcates right above the heart. As long as I don't have that, I can inflate the lungs because that seals itself off. And so if he didn't have the air to come in there to collapse the lungs, it slowly, by him breathing, was going to migrate to the outside. And the question I have is, how much of his death was caused by slow hemorrhaging, because he hit through both lungs, but just with 2 blades? So that's a slow, and then the air coming in, collapsing the lungs, him being calm, you put that all together and you have freaky things that take place. In fact, I had a medical doctor who's the first person in America to shoot the Grand Slam of sheep. He's in the 29 club. There's not that many people in it.
Yeah.
And he's a medical doctor. He lives in Anchorage, Alaska. I'm going to be hunting with him this fall. He said, Brian, I appreciate all this anatomy stuff you're doing, because he's a doctor. I'm just a layman. But there's a lot of things that happen that just can't be explained.
Yeah.
I don't accept that may be a truth, but I'm a born again Christian, and the Bible says get understanding. So I'm trying to understand why. But like in my elk situation, that's what caused me, Matty, to start the Anatomy Hunter. Because I didn't find that elk. I couldn't believe it in what took place. And I believe God used that instance to start me on the journey to do this. That's what come this here is a ministry. It's not a business.
Yeah.
Because it cost me a ton of money doing this. I have no income. I've never received 1 penny.
Yeah.
But it's a passion that I believe God put me on my heart to do.
I think the general curiosity, like it's the exact same thing as to why I keep running the podcast as well. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort. There is a lot of sacrifices essentially that I make as well, not because I am seeking praise or anything, but it's because I'm genuinely curious on finding out more and making bow hunting better as much as possible and making me a better archer as well. So I don't have those circumstances where you have missed animals or you've got animals that are running away injured or anything like that. Like it is the absolutely worst feeling. So yeah, it is very awesome to hear the story, but also to bring it all together like that.
Yeah, that's my story on why it was I got started. There's more details on how it all came about, but I took 2 years off work to do it, and that was last January. So I've been in it 2.5 years.
Yeah, amazing.
And if people were trying to get people to send us all these videos and stuff, Last year, I went to give away 5 free Reinhardt elk targets. I never got one person to give me a video, not one. Now, this year, I hired an editor as a consultant who produces TV shows, so he knows what he's doing. And he's taken our views up from, I think we're at like 1,000 followers. Now we're up to 45,000.
Yeah.
And then I got to meet some people, some famous people. And I did a podcast last Friday night out in New Jersey with a cop from New York. And he said, "You want to go bear hunting?" So I'm going to be able to do a bear hunt in New Jersey in October. And there's going to be 5 of us hunting and everybody's filming their hunts. So hopefully out of 5, hopefully we'll get 3 bears, let's say. I'll get that. And then I'm going back to Ohio. And I met a man who arguably is the #1 white-tailed deer, knowledgeable and experienced hunter that I know that lives. I didn't know anybody knows what he does. And he's very well connected. He's an expert. He's got 14 Boone and Crockett bucks. And he's invited me there with a bunch of his buddies, and he's hoping to get me 40 kills on film this year.
Yeah, wow.
To work on the project. So
when you're saying film, though, you don't want just the footage of the shot happening. You want to do the full dissection, the full anatomy breakdown, cut open. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Even with you, let's say you do the hunt and you don't film it. You could still, on say a red stag or some animal that you got over there, even a goat, you can still take the pictures of the dead animal, put a stick in it. There's where it went in, where it came out, skin it up and take it, and then see where the holes are at from the side, the top view, and gut it and show what it hit. But it's got to be, so if somebody is going hunting, everything is clear to them to see, okay, hit it here. Okay, everything's got to be plain. And the problem is it's very hard to take photographs because you have to get the photograph at 90 degrees. And so if it's laying on the ground and you're over here, you shoot it, the hole looks like it's higher. So I literally, when I take them, I start clicking with my camera. I go click. I go all the way from the belly all the way to the back. So now I can say a dozen photos and I can get the one that represents best, the one that's 90 degrees on.
Yeah, interesting.
Then you get to see it. See, that's something you could do like on a goat. How far back do the ribs or do the lungs go on a goat? How far back do the ribs go? How many ribs do they have? That'd be all the stuff. If I went over there, that would be what I would want to do. And I'd want to hunt with people that are good shots, that got a lot of animals. So I could shoot some, but then I could examine a bunch of them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Something you brought up just then was the Reinhardt targets. And obviously 3D archery is a sport of archery. It's not necessarily designed for hunters, although it has a lot of crossover. Why do you think they don't make the rings in the kill zones, essentially?
Because okay, let's say you're making an archery target, right? You have to put a replaceable core there.
Got you. Okay. So you're looking for the thickest part of the surface.
If you put it lower, like for your heart shot, right? Now you've got a section of foam in the bottom that's very weak. So the target.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one reason. There's a number of reasons. But they've got it right now. I sculpture them like I'm doing that dinosaur that you saw and I'm doing a deer. Actually are putting all the kill zones on.
Oh, cool.
And it doesn't bother me because I tell people this. 3D archery teaches people to cripple deer. Besides where the kill zones are at, being inaccurate on many. The other thing is this. You're shooting at that same ring, no matter how high, how low, how far back, how far forward. And so if it's quartering away, you may hit that ring perfect, but the ribs come pointed and you'll go right on the outside of the rib cage in under the shoulder bone like this here, and right in front of it.
Yeah.
You go right behind it and you'll never end up getting in the inside. So that's the patent that I told you I've got on my deer that I had. I'm in the process of sculpturing that now. And if we can get it done, it's going to be released at the Archery Trade Association in Indianapolis, Indiana in January. That's my goal.
Okay. Can you explain more around the patent and what you're trying to design? Or
it's basically simple. You know how you had your holder there with your tissue in it there?
Correct, yeah.
So let's picture, and we go back to the paper plate. I'm using that analogy. I never finished that. I did instead of it being a single dimension object or paper plate, the lungs are 3-dimensional with the heart, lungs, and liver, right? So picture if you could take a marble and the animal's alive and you could put a marble like a tumor right by, let's say in your case, let's say it's the heart. You want to make the perfect heart shot. So let's say, make it easier for you to understand. So let's say we put a marble right on top of the heart where the fire hydrant shot is, right? Okay. Now you go on an archery target. And wherever you're shooting at, so let's say the animal's angled away, you had laser eyes that you could see through that deer target, and you can see that marble. Your arrow would hit that marble, but it's going to go in back by its guts. If you're up higher, it's going to go in higher. So as you walk around that animal, as you go higher or lower, all your arrows go through and hit the animal where they go through the center axis, the center kill, and hit that marble. So you're going to come in high, go through the marble, come out low. You're going to go in back, go through the marble, and come out forward. But that is the perfect spot. Now I'm going to have 2 kill zones. Like I said, one's going to show the heart, but the one I recommend is behind it about 2.5 inches, because you stay away from this. You stay away
The
from
shoulder
this
blade and stuff. Yeah.
the angles on everything. What I'm literally doing is I'm sculpturing the deer. I'm then going to hollow it out. I'm going to put my lung back in there with my hole in it, and I run all the arrows right through that hole. And then I fiberglass the tube in it, just like I'm doing on this target pack here. So then all the arrows go through that tube. But here's what you do. Because we hunt in trees, I measure what the angle is with an angle meter of where I come in at. Say it's 23 degrees. I hit it back here. Where that is to go through, let's say, where the heart is.
Your internet's just getting a bit funny, Brian.
So then if you're up in a tree or you're up on a hill down there, you ring, that would practice basketball. What's that?
Your internet's gone a bit funky.
We're getting cut in and out. I'm getting you a little jerky.
Yeah.
Should I go back inside again?
If you could, yeah, that would be amazing. Okay. I'll just pause it for 2 seconds.
You know what?
So back in process now, we're talking about your pattern and essentially the process of what you're doing. So the marble in the center is what we're talking about with the tubing that goes through. The 23-degree angle is about where you cut off.
Yes. And so what that would do, say, Mike, you wanted to learn to play basketball, and Michael Jordan taught you to play basketball. He taught you all these tricks. You still have to have muscle memory to do it, right?
Correct.
You got to go out and practice a free throw, a 3-shot, a 2-shot, a dribble, all that. This deer that I'm making is going to show you exactly where you hit it to be able to hit in your situation, the heart. Absolutely perfect. And you'll understand it. But to learn that, to put that in a hunting situation, you have to take the target and you've got to shoot it at all these different angles. So it becomes automatic when the deer's there, because you're shooting a deer, he's broadside, he turns, now you got to shoot him back farther. How much farther back do you go? So that's how come I take a protractor. I've got on my deer, he sets on a protractor, and I take a string, and when I measure the exact degrees, instead of it being 45, it's 47 degrees. Because I can't teach pinpoint perfect shot placement if I don't have everything scientifically down perfect. Because if you ask somebody, when I got into this, quartering away, what does quartering away mean?
Exactly. It's such a broad statement.
You know what a guy told me what the answer is? It means it's not broadside. Answer, but
not incorrect. Yeah.
So I need to have an exact angle. If it's 45 degrees, exactly where you hit it. And that's what this product is going to be designed to do, is people are going to get it. They're going to be able to shoot it. They're going to get understanding of it, because it's going to be the same thing as the deer I've got behind me, that when I was out there, all the arrows go through it and you can see where they're hit, where they went through. So I'm going to make a model of it when it's done. I'm going to hollow it out with my chainsaw. I'm going to have all the organs go back inside it. In fact, right now I've got the backbone in it. I got the shoulder blades in it as I'm sculpturing it. They're all going to go in there so people can see, oh, that's how that works. Because it's going to come when it's done. It's going to have dots that are on it. And every one of those dots is going to represent a degree. And then there's going to be 5 lines horizontally on the animal. One's going to be in the heart for Matty. So Matty wants to shoot him in the heart. Matty can shoot him in the heart. Then a firehouse shot. Then there's going to be my perfect kill shot. So that's 2 vertical lines. And then there's going to be 3 other ones for going back to the guts, going back to quartering away at the different degrees, going in there. So the 5 lines to shoot it. Yeah. And is it complicated? Yes. Is it going to take learning to do it? Yes. But our object is, when we're done, it can change the culture of people knowing exactly where to hit on the outside of the animal to make it hit exactly on the biggest target possible on the inside.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess that is the thing. It's the muscle memory of it is exactly what you're talking about, that hunters need to do. It's the same thing with setting up your shot process, right? That's a muscle memory process that you should go through, is doing a repeatable shot process. And so same thing then, why would you not practice on a target where you can practice it? And I think that's where a 3D target is amazing for your actual hunting abilities. It is really cool. But at the same time, if all the footage they've ever seen is shoot behind the shoulder somewhere, but what about the angle? That's the thing that people miss often, it seems. So yeah.
You're a commercial for this product I'm making, Matty. What do you have for archery targets in Australia?
Reinhardt,
You do.
we've got Reinhardt out here. We've got Wild Crete, which is a South African brand that gets shipped over. We've also got there's a few different brands like that do the box, like the cubes and stuff like that as well. So yeah. Yeah, I've got a Reinhardt myself. I've got the 16 face, is it maybe the 16 face cube or something like that? And then I've also got
18 to 1.
yes, and then I've also got a Wild Crete boar, the small little. It's actually a javelina, but yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So I bought the what I actually found was I went out hunting once and I missed a fox. It was right in front of me, like 2.5 meters, 1.5 meter, like it was very close. And I missed it, shot completely underneath it because of the crossover point from when you're shooting right here in front of you, the crossover point of where your arrow releases and where your sight actually sees. So
Yeah.
essentially that elevation. So what I did was I bought a target that I could have here in my office so I can shoot 3.5 meters across my office to make sure I don't miss any more foxes at my feet.
Wow, you get just okay. So you use one single pin, I take it.
No, I use a 3 pin slider sight. So I've got 20, 30, 40 on my pin. And
I
then,
thought you only
sorry,
shot 20 yards.
what was that?
I thought you only shot out to 20 yards.
Not always. The standard is I always try to shoot under 20 yards if possible, or 20 meters if possible. But what if necessarily, I guess a concept I like to live by is dead is good, but dead is better, right? So we want to see the animal stopped on the ground completely dead. I don't want to leave it for 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever the concept is there. I don't want to have to leave it. I want to see the animal dead. So I'll send a second arrow if I need to. Shoot it at 20, shoot it at 40.
I got you. Yep, there you go. Yep. I love everything you're saying, by the way, Matty. I
I,
love your on that attitude of that is taking the close shots in Australia, how that is, and you don't want laying them dead. That's all what it is that I'm about. That,
yeah,
by the way, is to have 150,000 deer a year killed that would have been wounded. That's my goal. 100.
yeah. Yeah, I really like the concept of lifting the stand. And I think we're really fortunate here that some of the not I don't know if they're pioneers, some of the godfathers, I don't know what you want to call it, but the standard has been set by people in Australia and it does get pushed a lot and pushed in a good way to educate people. There's a big force of reckoning trying to educate people and trying to improve that standard across the board. Because at the end of the day, hunting does not get looked at in a good eye. And so, what we need to do is make sure that any form of content that is getting put out there is putting hunting in the best light. Because unfortunately, there are your Peters and the people within the vegan communities and stuff like that that are willing to fight against you as much as they can. Not to say that happens every single day, but I'd say here in Australia, hunting isn't necessarily it isn't like the everyday norm.
Now, do you guys have any archery conventions at all?
We're getting better with them. There's associations and they have their own different things that happen within that. And then, for instance, there's an expo happening in October, which is the Wild Deer Hunting Expo, which I'm going to. There's a few different variations of things like that. There's a hunting expo. One of my other sponsors right now, Venture Hunting, which is a major store here in Australia, they're putting on their own hunting expedition where essentially people go to their location. They've got a nice big shop where they can host a lot of people. So they put on education nights, they put on videos, we went to an event recently there, which was a hunting for women. So trying to help break down that barrier to get people into the lifestyle of hunting a little bit more. So there's definitely a lot of people that are fighting towards making it more of a mainstream thing and making it more accessible for many people. It's just, yeah, I think there's a few trying to work on a lot right now.
Wow, that sounds right up my alley. I'd love to be able to be over there and have a seminar if there's enough people there. But I would need to be more educated on your different animals and have a place. If there's a place where we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing a doe hunt and whitetail deer. So have these guys specifically aim on them when they're quartering away on the right side. The liver sits on the right hand side, so they see what rib they went in at, where they hit the liver, where it came out, how far it went. So that's the sort of stuff that I need is to have people that can shoot them. I'm there. We examine it, research. We come up with all this together. So that'd be a great thing over there.
Yeah, I'll actually connect you with Matty Moore and Brad Smith after the podcast because they're the guys that are up at Kayuga all the time. And what you're saying about the video and camera footage that you need, they literally teach that day in, day out, especially on the Bowhunters course they run. They will essentially take shots on the live animals, do a live, what's it called? What's the
Autopsy.
autopsy? Yeah, live autopsy on the spot. Let's see what we've shot. Like they do that every day for multiple critters a day just to really show and see what it's hit and done. So yeah, I feel like they would have a lot of content even available for you straight away, which could be useful for your studies and research.
What all animals do they hunt?
That's mostly pigs.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. Buffalo, no, maybe scrub bulls, not buffalo, sorry, as well. But they have definitely done it on deer and stuff as well. This is one of the things I wanted to bring up with you. And I know I'd say we're starting to run out of time, but a white-tailed deer versus an elk or a white-tailed deer versus another type of deer in regards to lung spacing that's taking up on the body, do you know if there's much of a difference in the sense of a whitetail being a small deer? It actually seems like they've got quite a long lung space. Is that the same that's going to happen on all deer or not?
Yes and no. An elk is just a deeper bodied animal. So the lungs are going to be taller and shorter on shape than they will be on a deer. But it's basically, if you just think of, if you look at any animal and you see its rib cage, the lungs fill up the rib cage from where it's attached to the diaphragm.
Hmm.
So the diaphragm in different animals will attach, the diaphragm's attached to the ribs, and it goes down to the sternum and the bottom and up to the backbone and the top. And it's completely closed around. And so it's where, like on a pig, it's angles forward more on a pig than it does on a deer as far as where it attaches to the ribs. So when you literally, what I've done, say I was over there and you shot an animal, I tell you, I spent a lot of time in research. I'd go inside the cavity. I'd take the stomach out and the liver out, but the lungs and the heart are still in there and the diaphragm's there. I then would see where the diaphragm is attached to the ribs from the inside. I take a drill and I put screws right through the outside of the animal, following where that diaphragm is at. So then I can lay on the outside of the animal. You'll see all these screws there. That shows you how far back the lungs can go. That's because they can only go back to where the diaphragm is attached to the ribs. That's how far back they go. And it's absolutely perfect where it can be. It's just beautiful. I have to do that on so many more animals. And that's what, like on a bear that I'm doing. But for every time you do it, I've got to ruin the hide of an animal. It's like when I'm going bear hunting, what I'm going to do with my bear, and that's why I hope I don't want to get a big one because I ruin the hide. I'm literally going to lay the bear down and I'm going to cut a window out of fur off the rib cage, measure from the top of the fur to where the carcass is. And then I cut all the meat off the ribs. I leave it where the arrow went through. And then I try to inflate the lung. And then I can see where that lung is at in relationship to the fur and the carcass and how far back it goes. But I did a pig in Texas. We worked on it for 3 days.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I want to get all of this absolutely perfect. So
Yeah, I love that. I like the concepts of what you're saying and what you're doing. I feel like you are fighting the good fight, right? Trying to dissolve heartache for many hunters.
yeah, it sounds like your Kayuga guys are right up my alley. They're right up my alley, and I'd love to be able to work with them and put that, like I say, put the arrow, put the drill right in where the diaphragm is on the pig there, and then so we see that's how far back it goes, and we inflate the lungs because you can hyperinflate the lungs. And you can make them where they're not inflated as much when they're dead. But then to be able to see all this there with that, it'd be really good.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember one of the very first times I was just going out to a guy's block and shooting on a 3D target, and I shot a pig, and I was like, "Oh, that's too far forward." He's like, "That's a perfect shot, what you just took." And it was because a lot of the content that I'd essentially been consuming was very heavy American basis of the shooting that little bit further back, like what we've talked about a lot here. And that was like the beginning of the understanding of that opening of that ideal shot. I would call an ideal shot. However, within saying that, if it was a bigger bovine, I wouldn't think, and based on what I've heard and what I've learned through the podcast, that same heart shot probably wouldn't be as effective, or you wouldn't see the animal go down as fast as if you were to take a double lung shot.
They're going to die both ways, but if you hit the blood vessel on top of the heart, they'll die quicker.
Yeah, and I guess it is a small margin for error as well. So yeah, it's an interesting concept, right? It's this whole back and forward, a circle that we've been doing this whole podcast, really.
I'm just keeping it right behind the heart on a deer, about 2.5 inches, as close as I can, because you go back too far and then you hit low, then the liver is there.
Mm.
And I know a guy that's one of the best, most experienced hunters in the country. He's famous, and he is adamant to stay away from the Devil's Triangle. He uses a big broadhead with a powerful bow, and he shoots way back. From his perspective, if he was here, he goes from the back of the front leg, the crease, all the way back to the guts. That whole area for him, not to hit back that far, But if he knows if he hits that and he walks out of the woods, that animal's dead, he's going to recover it. Or if you go forward, it's shot in the shoulder and it's going to be crippled and you won't recover it. So again, that's different philosophies. I bring forth the facts and the truth. And again, I'm between you and him. I want to find where that paper plate is.
Is this tree stand hunting, or is it long shots that he's taking?
Both. He does both. So longer shots, he's got a bigger kill area. That's his point.
Yeah.
But you don't push the animal. You don't push the animal. You shoot it, you come back in the morning if you think you had a backfire, which is why when we go to broadheads, people ask me about broadheads. Here is my consensus that'll make sense to you. If you're going for, we'll call it the Matty shot, you're shooting the Devil's Triangle area. You want a broadhead that's made to penetrate through bone, because shoulder blade and the backbone, you got to go through that. You hit the humerus bone, you hit down low, you got to go through that. You want that. If you're going to go back farther, then you have the risk of hitting him in the guts. So then if you can hit him in the guts, you don't got to worry about bone. You want as big a broadhead as you can shoot. So that's how come I categorize the broadheads in two categories by where you're aiming. I'd want to make sure you shoot a solid broadhead that if you did hit that shoulder blade, you got the power, it's going to penetrate through. Somebody else that's shooting back farther, that's where using a bigger mechanical. They got all kinds of different ones there. You hit the guts, you have a bigger hole. When we went to go bear hunting a year ago, my son shot a bear. We wanted to go back farther. We didn't want to gut shoot him, but we wanted to know how far back can we go. So we thought if we go back too far, we're going to hit him in the guts. So we thought he's using a crossbow, 120 pounds. Let's use the biggest broadhead on the market. So he used a 3-inch Schwacker. It goes in small and it opens up real big. It's one Levi Morgan pushes. The problem was the bear came, it was a quartering on shot. He hit it right back by the shoulder blade and went back through. He did come out back because it was a quartering on shot through the middle and he did hit the lungs, but we never got to take that just totally broadside shot back farther. But with that case, we used a 3-inch broadhead because bears have thinner ribs than deer do. And you're shooting farther back and they're bigger in the back. So if you've got 120 pounds, why not go with the bigger broadhead on a crossbow? And that opens up. So.
Yeah, interesting. How much of a quartering shot was it? Because why not go on the front of the shoulder instead?
Well, it came into the bait. I was there filming it, came right on, and then he turned to walk away. He turned to go away. And when he turned, I said, shoot. So it's in bears twist. So the front end, it's just not all black and white. It's not like a stiff target that moves like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Came in, hit the backbone, cut through that with the Schwacker, did not break. It did good, just behind the shoulder blade. And then it came out in the middle of the animal going backwards. But he did get, again, there's another instance. He hit the backbone coming in, and instead of going through the dead space, he hit that lung right there. There's another instance right there on the entrance side. He hit that lung there, and we have evidence of that. And then he came out the lung on the other side. The bear went 50 yards. Bears die quicker than deer at about half the time. And that's something I'm wanting to get to the bottom of why. I've got my hypothesis why. And I think it's because their lungs collapse more and they're bigger in the back and they push that heart out of place quicker. But because I've watched them when they fall down, watch their lungs still breathing. And a bear, when they die, they give a death moan about, 75, 90% of the time. So I've watched them still breathe. Where a deer, when they go down and they're dead, they get up, they lay there. They don't breathe anymore. Their ribs aren't going. Where a bear will go down there and it'll still be breathing. The lungs are still going in and out. So the death on a bear is different. I don't know why, but my hypothesis, and it's maybe not even educated, but that the lungs are big. They push that heart out of place so the blood can't come back there. But there's still enough life in them that their lights go out real quick. But then they're sitting there laying down and it takes some time to actually die, but they drop. So
that's interesting. I'd say the most comparable animal we have here is a goat because they let out the moan as well, the death moan before they die. A lot of them, not all the time, but I'd say 75 to 80% as well.
How far do they die the same amount of time as other animals? Do they die quicker at all or not really?
They're very hardy. Yeah. I think it comes down to the lethality of the shot that you've taken is based on how fast the animal is going to die. So it's a hard one for me to say because I've seen animals drop in 5 meters from the space they were. I've seen animals die in 250 meters like that buck, for instance. So yeah, it's a hard one to gauge that they're faster or slower.
Just remember, it has to do with the lungs collapsing and hemorrhaging. But if that air can't get in there or the lungs go and it pushes that air back out, that's going to take that animal longer to die. And I'm on a journey, by the way, to find out an animal that shot through both lungs and lives. and I have evidence of one. Well, I have witnesses of and proof from them of 3, but I have not seen the holes in the lungs and then the live animal afterwards for me to actually show it. But I do have witnesses. He do a podcast with me where it went through the whole thing. He shows where the arrow went in, where it came out. He saw it in the hole in the lungs, but he didn't contact me. I did a podcast with a guy where they used a great big broadhead, and there was 3 of them involved in this that all saw it, perfect lung shot, bloods, everything went there. And I think it was, I don't know if it was 5 hours later, it was still alive and they had to shoot it again. It was absolutely showed through both lungs. But again, I need, for me to prove it to other people, I need the lungs here to show it. See this hole here?
100%. Yeah, that's the animal at the end. Did they have footage? They've got video footage of it all, and so you've seen the shot process and everything?
They don't. They've got the evidence of the animal afterwards. If you just say you shot one, and then all of a sudden you say it went in here, it went in there, I showed you where the lungs are, I hit it right there, and it lived for 5-6 hours before it died. But I don't have the lungs. I'm examining it myself. So just like the deer that I said, the elk that I hit through both lungs, guess what? I don't have it to prove it. It could have been that it was angled, that I went through one lung and the liver, and that's why it took so long to die. Since I don't have it, I don't know, because we are wrong. If people send me videos of what I think, I am wrong most of the time. In all these videos, if you'd be in the seminars and you'd see that we have there of what it is that you think, you just wouldn't believe them. The guy hits a bear back in the guts, and he hit the lung, and there's even more lung behind it, bigger than he hit. And then you hang it up in the gut, then all of a sudden the hole is in the dead middle. How can that be the same bear? But that shows you how they crunch together there. They scrunch together everything. It's not an illusion, but it rounds out versus when it's hung up and it's stretched out. All of these things, we are wrong on what. I had a guy that shot a bear last year that my son, who you met earlier, he filmed it. It was angled away, and it ended up going through the shoulder blade and back out the guts. Okay, so instead of being the guts to the shoulder blade, to the front shoulder, it was the opposite. So we go, how could that be? You got the hole in it. That's what proved it was there. So we watched it, and my wife saw how the bear went away. So it was angled away, but it turned to look back, and the bear's in a curve. So it's angled away and quarter two, and he hit the shoulder blade. I've got, again, we boiled the shoulder blade, so I've got the shoulder blade to show the nick in it, save the broadhead, where it went through and where it came out. But you could see by the legs, the bear was in a turn. You could see it. There's no way that you would think it. He said, no, it was angled away. And then he made a terrible shot because the shoulder blade, if that would have went forward, he'd have missed everything. But nope, it came right out, didn't go far, and died right away. So happens all the time.
Definitely.
All the time. So I'm hoping through this, Matty, that you're going to be able to take some of this and help me get some evidence on some of these other animals over there.
Yeah, I'd put the call out to the listeners in general, especially guys who get to go out hunting lots. If you can take the photos and send it through to Brian, which is the Anatomy Hunter on Instagram, send him through any pictures that you have of the biopsy, the shot process, the arrow in the animal, and the biopsy as well. Like that stuff, if it can help to get, once again, the education of bow hunting out there better, and shot processes, and explain why we do what we do here in Australia and why I think we're getting a lot of great results. Yeah, I think the more the merrier.
Good. I like it. I'm very happy to hear how you are. I don't like to use the word advanced, but how you guys have a better concern, it seems, for killing the animal and taking shorter shots to be able to execute that, as opposed to just taking longer shots. I very much appreciate that. I can't be the moral police and tell somebody how far to shoot, because there's people
Exactly. Yeah.
yards better than I can at 20, but you can't argue the fact that animal can take a step. And I tell people, if God made the perfect shot right on the bullseye where you want to hit, that animal still takes a step, and you're going from your heart shot to a gut shot, just like that. Distance is going to wound animals. Now, on the other hand, people argue with me that longer shots, they're better at, because they concentrate on archery. When the animal's closer, they're more nervous, and they tend to not make as good a shot. All this stuff's certainly not black and white.
I think there's also a lot down to your arrow setup, right? Because, and I don't know the full depths of this, but the testing they've just done, that extensive testing they did through Easton's, and the guy that's done it, I tried to get in contact with him, but I haven't been able to yet. But they did a noise test as well. And based on the height and size of your vanes, obviously that's going to play into effect because you could take a shot at 60 meters or 60 yards or whatever it is, a further shot where the animal isn't going to react to the sound of the bow, but what it hears instead is shh. Like it's hearing that sound coming, so it's reacting to the sound of the arrow rather than the sound of the bow. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is why people tinker so much with their setups because they want to try find the quietest, the fastest, the heaviest hitting. Yeah, there's so many different aspects to archery where you can really geek out. But yeah, it is. It's a forever rabbit hole, which I feel like with technology we're getting closer and better outputs in general.
I am really glad to hear that. That encourages me.
Yeah, you're fighting the good fight, like I said.
But you're living it though. You're living it and you're concerned about it. So I'm very, very glad to hear that. Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I think this is actually probably a good place to wrap because I've unfortunately got to get some work done. It's getting to the middle of my day.
Say, what show are you going to go on? By the way, the Survivor one. What show are you going to be on?
I actually don't think I don't think I'm allowed to say that. Yeah, I was telling Brian before this. I haven't announced this on the podcast, but I was hit up to go on a survival show, and essentially a week and a half before I was meant to go away, it got pulled from me. Essentially, I'm pretty sure it was a visa issue where they weren't going to get my visa in for the American show that I need to be on, so therefore I couldn't go on the show. But yeah, a week and a half before I thought I was going away, and I was going to be away for 8 to 12 weeks, and I put on all this weight for it. They're like, "Oh no, this isn't happening anymore." So, with the podcast, I'd pretty much banked up so many episodes. I think maybe the last 6 or 8 episodes were all done in the space of about a week and I just pre-programmed them all out, scheduled it already because of I thought it was going to be away. Yeah.
What's your background, Matty, that you thought you could go do that and win? What's your background in survival?
Mate, I'm as green as it comes. I am a city boy. I grew up on a farm for a little bit, but I'm a city boy. I literally have been taught by the community over the last 6 years since I got into bow hunting, and that has just given me enough. Also, a very stubborn bastard. So I think sheer grit and learning. The amount of I had probably 3 months of preparation, so I did a lot of YouTubing, a lot of trial and error practicing myself. So yeah, it was just like the sheer grit that I have and the simple know-hows. I guess I was trying to self-educate myself for it, and I had no belief that I would fail it. And so I was like, why not go and give it your best shot?
Wow, that's great. Maybe they'll call you back.
Yeah, I am still on a casting list, so we'll see. Not for that show, but just in general. But who knows?
It was great talking to you, Matty. Yeah, don't
Likewise.
be afraid to put me in contact with the Kayuga people and all that because they're doing what I want to do. And I think there's a lot they could do to help what I'm doing. I don't know if there's anything I could do to help them, but I just wish I could be over there and experience a lot of all that you have over there. That
Mm.
just intrigues me.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'll connect you on Instagram at least, and yeah, you guys can talk from there.
Sounds great.
Amazing. Thanks, Brian. Once again, you can find Brian on Instagram at the Anatomy Hunter. Is the best place to go. He's got some great videos. He's constantly putting up content, talking a lot about just the conversations of what we had today. I think the understanding of knowing how to make the best shot is the best thing we can do to help educate ourselves. And then practicing that on repeat is going to help you even more. So, Brian, thank you for your time. Thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matty, and have a great day.